Hold on to your seats, because what you're about to read is the wildest, most jaw-dropping political showdown in modern British history. Picture this: the hallowed halls of the House of Commons, typically a place of stuffy debates and polite jabs, transformed into a gladiatorial arena where tempers flared, fists nearly flew, and chaos reigned supreme. On one side, Nigel Farage, the firebrand leader of Reform UK, his face crimson with rage, charging like a bull toward his nemesis. On the other, Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader and Prime Minister, smugly basking in his latest diplomatic triumphs, until he was forced to flee the chamber in disgrace. What sparked this unbelievable eruption? What words pushed Farage over the edge into a frenzy that left MPs gasping and security scrambling? You won't believe the twists and turns ahead, so buckle up. This is Parliament like you've never seen it before, and it's about to change everything. Wait. Before we dive deeper into this political volcano, do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. If you don't, you'll miss out on every electrifying detail of this unfolding saga. And trust me, you need to know what happens next. Subscribing locks you into the front row of this roller coaster ride through Britain's most chaotic moments. Don't risk being left in the dark as the nation's future hangs in the balance. Join our channel and stay ahead of the madness. Hit subscribe, and let's plunge into the insanity together. To understand how this explosive clash came to be, let's rewind just a bit. The week leading up to this parliamentary pandemonium was already a whirlwind for Sir Keir Starmer. Fresh off a high-stakes diplomatic blitz, the Labour leader had been strutting his stuff on the global stage, rubbing elbows with world leaders in Washington and rallying Europe and Canada to bolster Ukraine against the backdrop of a highly publicized spat between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky. Polls were buzzing with the news. Labour was clawing back a lead over Reform UK, gaining 2 precious points since late February, according to the boffins at YouGov's research labs. Starmer's approval ratings, though still underwater at a grim -28, had spiked by 11 points in just 7 days, per More in Common's latest survey. The man was riding high, his chest puffed out with pride as 28% of Brits crowned him the best pick for Prime Minister, leapfrogging Farage, who slumped to 22%. Across the aisle, Nigel Farage was simmering. Reform UK's support held steady at 25%, a respectable showing, but the Tories had slipped to 21%, leaving Farage's crew as Labour's chief rival. Yet, despite his party's resilience, Farage couldn't stomach Starmer's victory lap. The Prime Minister's smug grin, his self-congratulatory speeches about international leadership, and the growing chatter that this was Starmer's best period in Downing Street, it was all too much. Farage, the self-styled champion of the people, felt the ground shifting beneath him. And then, on March 5, 2025, it all boiled over in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. The House of Commons that day was already a pressure cooker. MPs shuffled in, their whispers tinged with unease. The air crackled with tension as Starmer rose to speak, his voice dripping with the confidence of a man who just charmed the White House and outmaneuvered his critics. He began touting his latest diplomatic wins, his summit with Europe and Canada, his deft handling of the Ukraine crisis, his defiance of Trump's brash skepticism. The chamber was silent, hanging on his every word. But then, like a thunderclap shattering a still night, Nigel Farage erupted. "Enough of this," he roared, his voice a guttural war cry that reverberated off the ancient wood-paneled walls. MPs froze, jaws dropping as Farage slammed his fist onto the dispatch box with a force that seemed to shake the very foundations of Parliament. His face was a mask of fury, red, veins bulging, eyes wild with a rage that had been festering for weeks. "You're selling out this country," he bellowed, pointing an accusatory finger at Starmer, his entire body trembling as if possessed by some primal force. The chamber exploded into chaos, MPs shouting, some leaping to their feet, others cowering in disbelief. What had Starmer said to unleash this beast? Rewind 30 seconds. The Prime Minister had been waxing poetic about his coalition of the willing, a grand plan with France to send European troops to enforce peace in Ukraine, a direct jab at Trump and his VP, J.D. Vance, who dismissed such efforts as feeble. Farage, already bristling from Vance's insults to British troops, more on that bombshell later, saw red. To him, Starmer's speech wasn't just policy. It was a personal affront, a smug taunt from a man who'd stolen his spotlight and dared to lecture him on Britain's honour. But hold on, because what happened next was straight out of a Hollywood blockbuster. Farage didn't just yell, he lunged. Yes, you read that right. The Reform UK leader, a man who'd built his career on fiery rhetoric, charged towards Starmer like a raging bull in a china shop. Gasps filled the room as MPs shrieked, papers flew, and security officers bolted from their posts, their boots pounding the floor in a desperate race to intervene. Farage's fists were clenched, his intent unmistakable. He was seconds away from turning a verbal sparring match into a full-on fistfight. "Disgrace!" he spat, his voice cracking with emotion as security grabbed him mere inches from Starmer. The Prime Minister, caught off guard, flinched, his smug facade crumbling for a split second before he regained his composure. But Farage wasn't done. Thrashing against the guards, his suit jacket askew, he kept screaming, "You're a disgrace to this nation." The scene was utter mayhem. Tory MPs gawked in stunned silence, Labour backbenchers jeered, and the Speaker's cries of "Order! Order!" were drowned out by the cacophony. And then, the twist no one saw coming. Starmer turned tail and ran. That's right, the Prime Minister, the man who'd faced down Trump and Zelensky, bolted from the chamber like a deer fleeing a hunter. Forced out by the sheer weight of the chaos he'd ignited, he vanished through the doors, leaving Farage panting and restrained, his fury still burning bright. MPs whispered in disbelief. Had they just witnessed the downfall of two political titans in one fell swoop? Let's pause to catch our breath, because this madness demands a closer look. What did this mean for British politics? Was Farage's outburst a heroic stand against a smug elite, or a humiliating meltdown that torched his credibility? And Starmer, did his retreat signal weakness, or was it a cunning move to let Farage self-destruct? The polls offered clues but no answers. Labour was edging ahead, sure, but Farage's 25% base hadn't budged. Meanwhile, Tory leader Kemi Badenoch, languishing at 12% support, sat silently, perhaps plotting her own comeback amid the wreckage. Social media erupted. "Farage just handed Starmer the win," one ex-user shrieked. "No, Starmer's a coward, fleeing proves it," another fired back. The More in Common poll, conducted over the weekend, showed Starmer's approval ticking up 5 points, his disapproval dropping 6. Yet in that moment, numbers meant nothing. Only the image of Farage, disheveled and raging, and Starmer, vanishing in disgrace, burned into the public's mind. To fully grasp this chaos, we need to zoom out. Farage's fury wasn't just about Starmer. It was fueled by a transatlantic tempest. Days earlier, US Vice President J.D. Vance had sparked outrage by scoffing at a proposed Anglo-French force for Ukraine, calling it 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years. The insult stung deep. British troops had bled alongside Americans in Iraq and Afghanistan, and Farage, a Trump ally, took it personally. "Wrong, wrong, wrong," he thundered on GB News, defending the UK's honour while subtly distancing himself from Trump's camp. Starmer, meanwhile, had seized the moment, jetting to Washington and rallying Europe to defy Vance's skepticism. His coalition of the willing was a middle finger to Trump's isolationism, and it was working. More in Common found 56% of Brits approved of the government's Ukraine stance, with only 9% dissenting. But Farage saw it as grandstanding, a betrayal of Britain's sovereignty to curry favour with globalists. That clash of visions, Starmer's cosmopolitan swagger versus Farage's populist defiance, set the stage for their common showdown. Back in Parliament, the dust settled, but the shockwaves didn't. Farage, dragged to his seat, glared across the chamber, his dream of leading Britain now teetering. Starmer, safely out of sight, had dodged a physical blow but not the optics of retreat. Labour MPs crowed that this was Keir's finest hour, while Reform loyalists hailed Farage as a warrior unbowed. The truth? No one knew who'd won, or lost. So, what say you? Was Farage justified in his volcanic rage, or did Starmer outsmart him by fleeing? Drop your take in the comments below. We're dying to hear it. And if this roller coaster of political pandemonium has you hooked, smash that like button and subscribe for more. British politics has never been this unhinged, and we're here to break it all down as the drama unfolds. Don't miss out. Join us now.